Okay. So, good afternoon and welcome to everybody to our first event of the World Trade Institute's Know the Gap Gender Lecture Series. My name is Nicolò Alessi and I'm a postdoc researcher at the WTI. And today I have the pleasure to be the host of this first lecture. And before introducing today's speaker, let me quickly give you some information about our gender lecture series. The Know the Gap Gender Lecture Series is organized by Professor Elisa Fornalé of the WTI as part of the SNF research project Gender Equality in the Mirror, Clothing the Invisibility of Women's Participation at the International Level. And it's also part of the Horizon project HR Just on human rights justifications. This series started in 2019, and since then it has been a source of fundamental insights and numerous issues related to gender studies, thanks to the contribution of prominent experts in this field. This year's lecture series aims to provide some tools to navigate through this complex area of study, which has been attracting increasing scholarly attention from various perspectives, and has also inspired the evolution of political systems and societies towards more equality and inclusivity. To do so, in every lecture we are going to have until the end of December, we will deal with a specific keyword of gender studies, which will help us have some points of reference to have a better grasp of this fascinating and complex field of study. So today we are going to talk about gender mainstreaming. And our invited speaker is Professor Vera Lomazzi. Vera is assistant professor in sociology at the Department of Management of the University of Bergamo in Italy. Her main research interests are the cross-cultural study of gender equality and gender role attitudes and also values change. Besides her academic activity, she also provides applied research, consultancy, and training on these issues to NGOs, administration, and companies. Today's lecture is entitled The European Gender Mainstreaming Achievements and Challenges. So thank you very much, Vera, for accepting our invitation. And I really very much look forward to your lecture and also to the discussion. Just a few last remarks before starting with the lecture. First, as I already wrote in the chat, the lecture will be recorded and then will be uploaded on the WTI website. So everyone who is interested in that can get back to it there. And then secondly, the lecture is by all means interactive. So please feel free to share your comments and also ask questions by writing in the chat box or raising your virtual hand. The presentation will last around 25-30 minutes, and then we will open the floor to the discussion, to which I very much look forward. So that being said, I leave the floor to Vera. Thank you so much again, Vera, and the floor is yours.
Okay, so thank you, Nicolò. Thanks for the invitation. Very happy to be here and share some inputs. So with not a very in-depth lesson or talk on gender mainstreaming, but the idea is to provide some elements for orienting around this concept. But I also want to thank all of you that are joining this seminar today. And I will share my presentation. I hope that you can see it.
Yes.
Yes, great. So the idea of the talk today is to focus on the concept of the gender mainstreaming in the way that has been applied in Europe. And I have to put forward a bias. So I'm a sociologist, that is my perspective. I'm saying this because, of course, the issue of gender mainstreaming can be faced from different angles. So one could focus just on the legislation that is deriving from this perspective, or to policies, or to practices, or many other aspects. So my background is in sociology, so I'm more interested, let's say, in the societal impact of this framework. You will see that I will also talk about policies, but that's my point of view, point of start. And basically, what we are going to address today is, let's say, what it is. Gender mainstreaming is a sort of definition. Where does this come from? So a little bit of history back in the past to see when and why this concept came up. Then we will try to understand if we need this, if it's just something that politicians like to, and policymakers like to talk about, but to what extent this is implemented, and why we still need that. And I would also try to mention some limitation of this framework, this strategy, and also think that we can make it to make some example in terms of policies and also in research, how the gender mainstreaming can be applied in real life, I would say. And as you have heard myself speaking, I'm talking about framework, talking about strategy, because gender mainstreaming is not just a goal itself. It's like the journey that policymakers and generally society are doing towards gender equality. Of course, these two concepts are strictly related, but gender mainstreaming is more a strategy to empower and realize gender equality between men and women. And it is a mainstreaming. So we use this term also in daily life, maybe when we want to say, okay, this needs to be mainstreamed. That means that this perspective, which is the gender perspective, should be applied in all the policies, in all the programs. And we will try to understand what it means to adopt a gender perspective in all the phases of a policy making or a program. And it's interesting because it means that is in all policies, so not just those related to gender equality, because this is sometimes people misunderstand this and think, oh, this relates only to gender equality policies. No, it's not only about that. It's actually for all policies. So I'm doing, I don't know, something on environment. At least in Europe, we should apply also a gender perspective also in that kind of policies. And what it means to take in account the differences between men and women in all the phases. So I'm planning. What does it mean? And in the moment that I'm planning, I also think what could be the impact or the effect of my action on women and men. That could be different. We will make some example on this. And many countries today, gender mainstreaming in the official policy is recognized, is applied. Sometimes it's only more formally than substantially, but is there. And but the history, as I mentioned before, I wanted to give you some input of when all this started. The term gender mainstreaming came a little bit later, but I think that a crucial date is 1985, because in this year there was the third World Conference in Nairobi, the Conference of the United Nations in Nairobi, and that it's really a cultural turning point, because in that occasion it was basically the first time that there was a consensus around the issue of recognizing the key role of women in defining their contribution to the realization of the development goals. And but more interesting, it was the moment that okay, but we need to understand the real situation of women, and to being able to understand that, we need data. So that's the moment that gender statistics, so today now we call gender statistics, and we are used to have information about employment and unemployment by gender, for example, or sex disaggregate information about educational attainment, for example. Today, these are normal for us, but it was not the case in 1985, where there was general literacy information or general employment data. So at that time, it was clear that if we want to understand and to understand the tackle gaps between women and men, and being able to really understand the situation of women in different parts of the world, we need data, and data that should be disaggregated by sex. So that's the basic level of gender statistics. Then in gender statistics, there is also all the other aspects on what are we going to collect the data and what we are going to use, in which way we are going to use this data in a gender perspective. But sex differentiated data by sex enter in place in this moment. I'm really emphasizing this point because I also use data a lot in my research. So for me, data are something very important. And the fact that in a World Conference, this was recognized as a key element, that was really the starting point for all the policies that we have now. Otherwise, we would not be able to understand where we are, also in terms of gender equality. Actually, the term gender mainstreaming arrived 10 years later in 1995 at the fourth World Conference on Women in Beijing. And here it was defined as a global strategy for gender equality. So actually, the Article 79 in the report of the UN is really stated that governments and other actors, and this is interesting because it means that the responsibility is not just in the hand of governments, but any other actors that are doing anything, like in policy, it could be also NGOs or companies, so that what embrace something can also do that in a gender mainstreaming perspective. And that should be applied in all policies, programs, and we say, so that an analysis of the effect on women and men should be made before that the decisions are made. So this seems obvious, but it's not that easy as it could seem. So if you think, for example, during the pandemic, so there was an emergency, there was an order of like stay-at-home order. We all know the big increase of the use of remote working. This was already available in the past, but during the pandemic that became very widespread, and today it's also something that we keep doing. But in that moment, there was not a gender mainstreaming analysis of the consequences of being at home, especially for women working from home, and also having to deal with the big increase of informal care demands, because also kids were at home. So not taking into account pre-existing gender inequalities actually created an increase of gender inequality at home during the pandemic. So that is just an example of how it's not that easy to take into account the effect on women and men of decision in the moment that they are taken. That's sometimes this is because there is not, let's say, knowledge, or there is not awareness. There is no time to think deeply in that sense, like when there is some emergency situation, but sometimes also because there are not enough women in the bodies that are taking decisions. So also bringing the diversity and the different issues can sometimes you really need people that really knows what are the situation because of their gender or the minority belonging. Some gender diversity is not a minority things, but still, it's a diversity aspect. So that's let's say that the more a global thought, but the Council of Europe in 1996 decided to establish a group of high-level commissioners that should have think about and developing the concept of gender mainstreaming to be applied in Europe. And this became, let's say, recognized 1 year later with the Treaty of Amsterdam, where gender equality became one of the goals of the Union. So this is something strong because putting gender equality as a goal of the Union, it means that the European Union and all the bodies really should go in that direction. And by saying European Union, we are also mentioning all the member states that belong to Europe. So this is not something that is just abstract, because we know, I think that is like 70% of national legislation are deriving from the European level of lawmaking. So it is really something powerful in this sense. And another element which is important is that in 2009, with the Treaty of Lisbon, equality between men and women is also recognized as a value of the European Union, and it's also included in the Charter of the Fundamental Rights. So this means that as a binding legal force, and being part of the value of the Union, this also has an implication, of course, for those countries that are already members, but also those countries that are candidate members of the Union, because, of course, they have to align, let's say, the financial aspects to be in the market, in the European market, but also they have to align with the values of the Union. So the fact that there is gender equality there, it means that, I don't know, countries that apply to become a member of the European Union, they cannot have laws or legislation that, I don't know, for example, forbid certain jobs to women. This was the case for some countries that joined the Union in the past, from the ex-Soviet countries. They had maybe legislation that were saying, okay, these jobs are not for women. They have to, of course, to change the legislation to align to the values of the Union. So, generally speaking, the gender mainstreaming, as we mentioned, it's in every stage of every policy process, in the design, in the implementation, in monitoring, and in the evaluation. So these four steps are relevant because it means that the gender perspective has to be applied in all these steps. And how this is implemented, let's say that the transmission from the European level to the national one is that this strategy, because it's a strategy, is implemented through the directives or recommendation or action programs. So sometimes these also, okay, when there are recommendations, yeah, they are just recommendations, but in other cases, countries are required to improve their legislation, for example, or to adopt communally oriented policies. So this is something which is quite powerful if you think about it. And in practice, what it means that this perspective should be in the context, so taking up in equal account the specific interest of women on men and women. And I said before, this is not just about policies about gender equality. It can also be about, I don't know, environment or agriculture or medicine, anything. So you should take in account both the interest and another question is about who. We mentioned this, gender representation in bodies that produce law and regulation, and that's now. So to evaluate the gender impact, that means that that's in the monitoring and in the evaluation phases of the implementation of a project or policies. The gender perspective should also be there. There is also this aspects, which is quite interesting in the European gender mainstreaming, which is this gender mainstreaming cycle. So I think in this circular process where there is 4 phases, like define the policy, define the needs, planning, action, so the act, and checking, so the monitoring phase. And here I want to, maybe, I guess you already know the European Institute for Gender Equality. This is the European Institute that really addresses the issue of gender equality in terms of monitoring what's going on in the country, how the gender mainstreaming is implemented, what kind of achievement is bringing, and this is really I mean, you can really find a lot of information on their website, studies, reports, and also tools. So, for example, for gender mainstreaming, they provide a series of tools that can be can be used as a reference, I mean, as a university, for example, or for projects or for policy making. And for example, so this is really a screenshot from their website, but just to show you what could be the tools. For example, the phases is about defining a policy. Okay, what do we need? We need gender statistics, we mentioned, okay, and then there are some tools for that. Or then we need to do a gender analysis, for example, okay, we have to evaluate the needs of population about with a gender perspective, how we do that. And there you can find some inputs there. Or also, okay, already in the defined moment, we need to plan in advance the impact assessment. No? And there we have tools for that, and so on. For the planning tools, then we need gender budgeting or gender indicators. For the action tools, you can find, for example, training or how can we raise awareness about gender issues. There are some tools there that you can find, and then also for monitoring and evaluation. So I thought to maybe you already know these tools, but for those of you that are less familiar with these instruments, you can find it on the European Institute of Gender Equality website. They have many of these tools, and is quite an interesting resource to use. Point is, do we need all of this? Because sometimes, especially policymakers and businessmen and so on, say, okay, other work to do, other things to monitor. We have so many paperwork to do. Do we really need that? I mean, in the end, we are not doing that bad. No? So women can do whatever they want nowadays. No? So do we still need a project, a strategy for gender equality? I mean, I think that if you join this webinar, I guess we all agree that we still need that, but it's good to have a look at the situation. So this is again from the European Institute for Gender Equality, because among the many things that they do, they also provide this index every year, which is helpful for monitoring how not only the Union, but each country is improving or not, is developing towards gender equality. The index is built on several dimensions, so it's 6 dimensions that you can find here on the right side of the screen: health, power, use of time, knowledge, money, work condition, and so on. There are several indicators, gender statistics, we have here, and this index is designed to really inform and is built on the concept of gender mainstreaming in Europe. So this is really the main indicators that you used to evaluate in line with this big strategy that is developed at the European level. And you will find so many reports, because every year there is an assessment on specific aspect and so on. And they develop this index, and this can results on at the moment. So this index goes from 0 to 100. 100 is for full parity, which is of course ideal. This year, for the first time, the Union overall achieved 70, so never arrived to this point. So things are going better so far. We will see in the future, because it's not that once achieved, gender equality remain there. It's always something to be kept hold and not for granted. But you can see on the left side of the screen that not all the countries are at the same levels. So we have Scandinavian countries that have a higher level of gender equality achieved already for years. Other countries are not that in that at that level. So if you see Hungary, for example, is 57, or Cyprus is 60. You cannot find Switzerland because it's not in the Union at the moment, but you can have an idea of the different situations. So there is a big variety in Europe. So yes, we still need something that addresses this joint effort, because being part of the union means also to adhere to this value and adhere also to a common strategy. And in the field of gender equality, the strategy is this gender mainstreaming, which is also something unique because there is no any other part of the world where there is a sovereign national strategy for gender equality. So you can find countries that they have their own national strategy, but here you have a sovereign national strategy. So it means that there are 27 countries that, at least in principle, are going in the same direction of achieving gender equality. And also, we mentioned already, this was also relevant in the integration processes, but also for those countries that maybe are not putting gender equality as the first priority in their agenda. But the fact that there is this sovereign national strategy is also kind of pushing also those countries to implement and promoting gender equality policies at the national level. So that's why we still made that. There are, of course, limitations. So this is not the magic that we can do with this. As many good potential is powerful because of the issue that we mentioned, but there are limitations and challenges. One of the main critiques that has been discussed as in the literature is that the approach is too much individualistic. So it's really focused on women. But we know, I mean, as on the one hand, you can achieve gender equality because it's a gender balance. So you need all the gender there. So it's not just about women. It's not about only the individual, because we know that a lot of the power negotiation, arrangements in the family, arrangement in companies, all of this is not only just depending on the individual, but there are the relationship that this person has with the family, within the couple, or in the workplaces, and so on. So these aspects has been for a long time neglected. Also, in most of the European legislation until not really a long time ago, the focus was just like that gender equality was just equality at work. So bringing women in the labor force, which is of course important, but it's not only about that. So gender equality is a multi-concept, and some achievements were really happened with a very slow pace. Also because if we focus only on one dimension, like bringing women in the labor market, but we don't work on everything that is around this, like making this possible, like providing support for care or engaging men much more in the care of children, for example, became really difficult, because then it means that these inequalities is increasing in unpaid care, particularly. Recently, there is much more attention. So in 2019, there was a directive on work-life balance. So now this has been implemented in about all the countries. I'm thinking Italy, for example, as the national application of that European law in 2021. So we have that. And this is happening in all the countries. And there is also recent projects as a research or like the chair, for example, funding program recently just closed, really focusing on informal unpaid care inequality. So there is also this increased awareness and attention on this point. Other points which would require more attention is about intersectionality, because gender mainstreaming is just mainly about gender equality, but the risk is to neglect the accumulation of disadvantages, because gender inequality is a sort of cross-cutting inequality, but then, then there is age, then there is migration background, then there is people with disabilities that may have further disadvantages, further to the fact of being a woman. So, and this is not always tackled by let's say, the general gender mainstreaming framework. So this has to be always have a flag on it. There are also challenges nowadays to this framework, which is, okay, it's limitation, but still is the most powerful strategy that we have in Europe. And there are some challenges that are due to the resistance to, let's say, the European level in general, because there are opposition to the loss of sovereignty that national authorities and the government has. So this is a sort of general trends. But there are also the fact of implementing these common strategies, these common policies in countries that are very different. Different because of history, different political regime, different gender cultures, different history about Europe and about gender equality itself. So this can be a challenge. Also, we all are assisting two trends. Which are called this is just to summarize this Euroscepticism and anti-gender backlash. No? So with these movements that are against everything that is related to gender equality or just only have the word gender inside. And sometimes this is not made very explicit. But if you would look carefully, you will see that in some cases gender equality is a sort of implicit geopolitical battlefield, and this can be seen as an example of this is regarding the Istanbul Convention. So you know that there is this Convention of the Council of Europe for fighting violence against women. And if you have a look at the history of this and countries that are signed the convention and then ratified, because the signature is not enough to put this in place. And you look at the ratification and all the processes that are in the country, the protest against this, you will see that these issues has been made really as a sort of, so that we have countries that say, okay, this is bringing Western values in our culture. So this is challenging our tradition. This is not good. So there are these movements in several countries now that are going against this convention. Really as a sort of that's Europe, that's Western, we don't want it. So there are these processes going on. But again, it's important to have this kind of transnational strategy because it promotes a common framework for gender equality and for gender cultures. We will see in a second what it means, and also because action, laws, and procedures can also have an impact on what we call the opportunity structure, which is both a European structure but also a national structure. Very briefly, gender cultures refer to the system of values and models that people use to orient themselves in their behaviors concerning gender relation. We learn what is expected from us as men or women since our childhood. In the family, we receive this gender role expectation. We receive that when we go to school, when we start a job. We have this. In the negotiation with our partners, daily, we build up our gender relation and the gender power, our balance, right? So, but this is not just happening at the micro level with our family or with our schoolmates or our teachers or our colleagues. There is also a context, a cultural context where we live in and we receive and we have also these inputs. So these play a relevant role. Luckily, these are not granitic. These cultures are evolving. This can also change. Of course, they can also change, can also go in different direction, of course, but there is the possibility of change. And this is a scheme that I often use to explain how things can work and how this, in this case, the gender mainstreaming can help this process, because we have the two dimensions in society. So we have the cultural dimension, which are the values, the norms, expectation about what people expect from us as men, as women, in our educational pathways, or what they expect from us at work, just because we are men or women. There are opinion, beliefs that legitimize our roles. But there are also a structural component, which is a sort of organized system of opportunities. And this is what allows us to implement our goals, to achieve our goals, to put in practice what we believe that is right for our life. So to make an example, I don't know, all the issues, all the resources, welfare system for work-life balance, for example. Yes, or for example, the provision of childcare. So of course, that is something very structured because it means that we are putting something on, we are investing in childcare. But at the same time, so I'm enabling people to use these services and then maybe enter in the labor market because they are relieved from these from the extra burden, okay, not just to, of course, to taking care of children, that's not a burden, but the extra care that could risk to limit the full participation in other activities. But at the same time, I'm not only enabling this choice, but I'm also saying that this is fine. So I'm a society and policymaker, I'm saying, hey, I think that this is correct, this is fine, this is something that we legitimize, that parents can decide who is going to work and who is going to take care of children because we are giving the structure. So there is also cultural elements here that is normalizing these aspects. So the gender mainstreaming framework in this sense is operating on the opportunity structure and by default also providing a cultural impact on that. Now I'm going towards the conclusion, but I want to give you some example, and then I will make available also the slides so that you can read them. There are also some links so you can read further. So this is an example of the policies in migration, in the field of migration, so the gender mainstreaming of these policies. So myself and my colleague, Isabella Crespi, we were contacted by the Council of Europe with this commission that deals with migration policies to have information, to have support in the preparation of the documents. Then we also intervene in the assembly because I wanted to prepare a report and then to have a ratification about what at the European level should be done to gender mainstream migration policies. There were issues because, for example, a lot of data in following migration flows, they were not divided by gender, for example. So we started, and you will see all the documentation there. So there is a first part related to the analysis. So what it means to adopt a gender perspective, looking at the migration. So, okay, migration is actually a gender phenomenon because there are different expectations, different norms, power relations that starts already in the decision of leaving the country that people live. That people left, and if we don't take care of this, and also this gender perspective follows and the needs, and then all the aspects that people face in all the phases of the migration flow, then this is gonna not create a positive reaction, a positive integration or dealing with the issue of migration, because there are also intersectional discrimination and so on. That resulted then in a later part of this resolution. There are also how the gender mainstreaming should be implemented in migration policies. There are a list of recommendation aspects that policymakers will have to take into account, like ensuring single-sex accommodation facilities, for example, for migrants, but taking account the different needs of young boys and young girls, or taking account feminine hygiene products. These were not always made available to migrants or asylum seekers, for example, or taking account the gender-sensitive approach to health, for example. So all these aspects, that of course, if we stop thinking about and say, okay, let's think what are the issues, they are also maybe obvious, but they were not written anywhere until now. So that's what it means, for example, to consider these in policies. But also when we write, I guess that in the audience there are academics writing projects, research projects or research funding applications. When we apply for European funding, there is, regardless the topic of our research, I'm pretty sure that you will find a box to take and elements to fill in regarding gender mainstreaming or gender perspective. And it's not only about saying, oh, in the research team, we managed to reach a gender balance in the team. It's not only about that. It's not only about we try. So framing in words, we avoid discrimination by gender. It's not only about that. No? So we are required to really explain how this will be achieved in the project, no? Which is how would you assume a gender perspective, for example, in the needs analysis? Am I using gender statistics? How I use a gender perspective in activities. For example, I don't know, I'm planning workshop or I'm planning meetings with open to the population because I want to do public engagement. What time of the day I'm planning this. And I am also planning something, since I know that women have this unequal situation about unpaid care. I'm also providing childcare, for example, so that people can join, even if it's, I don't know, 6 in the evening. You know? I'm taking care of this. And then as in the evaluation, I'm using indicator that will allow me to see if my project has a different impact on men and women, for example. Am I evaluating gender differences? No? So all these aspects so taking care of gender perspective in all these aspects is also required when we address, for example, funding application in Europe, because as we said, Europe aims to have this gender mainstreaming decline in all the aspects. So when they spend money, they want to have this kind of investment. So I would stop here. And oh yes, here is a book that we wrote on this topic with my colleagues, Isabella Crespi, and that's available. And I will close for the moment the presentation. So maybe there are some questions or comments or additional remarks from you. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Vera, for this amazing overview on gender mainstreaming, an historical but also very concrete overview on this concept, which is which was really fascinating. And I think I noted many interesting points. The fact that mainstreaming, for instance, has to touch any kind of policy, which is a very fundamental point. And I would say also the connection between, representation and gender mainstreaming. So I was thinking if this connection, how much this connection is taken into account as a factor to guarantee a gender perspective in policies, because I totally see that there's a strong connection needed, but I don't know how much this part is implemented, especially related to women's participation. But those were only just a few remarks. I would like now to open the floor to further discussion. Maybe we can collect some comments and questions, and then I will leave you the floor again. Yeah, okay. So please, whoever wants to comment or ask questions, please raise your hands or write in the chat box. Thank you.
Thank you, Nicola. You were muted, so I don't know what you were saying in the last part, but I hope I can speak now.
Yeah, sorry, I just introduced you because you are
Oh,
a
thank
colleague
you.
of
Thank you.
ours.
Sorry.
Sorry, everybody, you
No,
are a
no
colleague
worries.
of
No
ours
worries.
with our project HR Just. So thank you very much for jumping in.
Thank you so much, Nicola. Thank you so much for organizing this. Thank you so much, Professor Lomazzi, for joining us. It was super interesting. I have just one. Yeah, you were already mentioning it somehow, especially when we were presenting the work of the Gender Institute about the aspect regarding training and actually raising awareness and the training, which I think it's also an important aspect, because when we wanted to introduce a gender perspective in policies, actually we should have policymakers who are aware of the fact that they should do so, and they should also be trained, because sometimes it's not really enough to put gender words somehow in some policies just to make them look gender friendly. So I was wondering, but I'm not really aware of what actually is I'm sure that something has been done at the European level, especially for making this policy valuable. For example, so the work that you're doing in advising also like the Parliamentary Assembly or the Council of Europe, of course, this is a super good instrument to inform policies about gender perspectives in some policies. I don't know whether this is something common also for the European Union, or whether something has been done in this regard. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Federica. Let's see if there are any other questions or comments. Otherwise, we can, if you want, Vera, we can go on with
Yeah,
these and
sure.
then see if there is something else.
Yeah, so first, to your points, Nicola, when you were saying that the representation is a guarantee of gender perspective in policies, depends. So I mean, of course, we need diversity in the bodies that take the decision, to be able to have different perspective, but it doesn't. I mean. And I'm connecting with what Federica was saying. The issue of training and awareness about gender equality issue is not only a question for men. So it's not just because you have maybe like two women at the table that automatically gender equality issues are put at the center. It depends also by the awareness of these women, and also the ability that these women have to bring up the issues and address the issues. So the training here is on several levels. So you need boards that need to be trained, generally speaking. But also men that should be also available, let's say, to leave the seat, which also is not something that easy. And women that are ready to take the lead really on this topic. It's not only because you're a woman, then automatically you are bringing gender equality. So we have many cases where this is not really happening. We have cases of women that are in leadership position in companies, in politics. So it's not only the where there are decision-making bodies, and sometimes women are taking off rights to women. So it's not just because women are in those places that it's enough. No, it's a continuous. So it's not a simple guarantee. This is also, but of course, we still need that. So, and there are instruments for that. Very debatable gender quotas, which are, for example, this instrument to bring the less represented gender, really like in some bodies, both in politics, both in the economic decision-making bodies, you have to have at least a certain number of women. which in principle I think that is a necessary instrument, no? But it's an instrument, it's not a goal, okay? But probably in some cases we need this to break this sailing glass, no? So otherwise nothing will happen. Then of course, I don't remember we say that, but that we achieve equality when we also have mediocre women taking leadership. So I don't know if we're achieving that, but I mean, this is kind of a joke, but it's not that easy, you know. It's not only because you have women on board that you automatically can guarantee the gender perspective in policy making. At the same time, you still need to bring women somehow there to give the possibility to that. Of course, the training issues is a key element here on both sides. No? So both in terms of awareness of the issue, because otherwise became just like pink washing, and then you just put the right words and the right things just to be accountable or to have a good reputation, because that has, so especially in business, this is very well very good for reputation of companies if they do something for gender equality. But you need to raise awareness of the real issues that are there, and why you need to implement some procedures, some practices in that direction. But also I remember, so I conducted research, and there was a focus group with managers coming from different countries, and there was this manager from Sweden that you would expect that is not an issue to be discussed. And actually we say no. One of the points were like really here, no, how we bring more women in the boards of companies, to have this process activated. And I was very surprised that was a Swedish man bringing this up. And he was saying something like, okay, but the point is that the boards need to be trained as in the selection phases. So this process of training and raising awareness is really at every level. No? So at the selection, at the human resources, when they are anyone in the companies, in the political parties, when they have to build up their list for the electors, when they have to elect, and also really also the upper level, when you have bodies, political bodies or in company bodies, when they have to know that you are taking in a woman not just to take notes during the board meetings. It's not a secretary, she's officer of the board. And then also training to leadership position and to women to be able to speak and bring up their points, but also to be aware that we are still in the phase that when women achieve some of this position, they are opening the way to other women. So they are not just doing that only for themselves, or they shouldn't only for themselves, but that's also the individual part enter in play, and sometimes it works, sometimes doesn't, as for the men. I think that I also answered to Federica's concern. Okay.
Thank you very much. Yeah, it was really an interesting point. Yeah, the fact that representation is not enough without training or without preparation for that. Yeah, absolutely. Is there by any chance anybody else that would like to add something? Yes, please, Elif.
Hello, Professor Lamazzi, thank you so much for your presentation. I really listened to it with really a big interest. Actually, my question, I'm just curious, and it's about a very recent topic about the rise of the right-wing powers in Europe after the elections, as we see. How do you evaluate the future contribution of this issue and gender mainstreaming in Europe? I'm just curious about your opinion about it. Thank you so much. It was a really, really great presentation.
Okay, can we skip and go to the next question? No, I think that this is really the issue. So that's when I was, so thanks for your question, because you pick really the points and the concerning points. All the time that there is a new composition of parliament or governments, you really never know what is going to happen beside what it is in the written in the program. So that is always a question mark regardless. Of course, certain cultural orientation are pretty clear that they have more traditional values and they are not really in support of gender equality as we are used to think of it. There are risks. There are risks because sometimes there is also the narrative that European women don't need actually gender equality because that is an issue of other cultures, where there are other prevalent religion denomination that are totally against women rights. And this is one of the problems actually, because in this way there is a sort of neglection of problem that actually European women have in terms of access to rights and to so this is one. So like use a narrative that in some countries is already happened, like, okay, but this is not a problem for our women, it's a problem for other women. And that means that funding to policies for gender equality or work-life balance, all that welfare system and so on, probably risk to be reduced because it's not an issue, it's not a priority. So that would be a risk. Other risk is the erosion of rights. That's of course a risk, and to autonomy of women to decide about their bodies, for example, or we have seen already in the past, even European countries are going against these aspects. So risks are there. That's why I don't remember which point of my presentation I was mentioning. Societies can change, the culture can change. We don't know the direction. It can go in both ways. Can go to an improvement of gender equality, but it's not that gender equality, because it's once achieved, at least in the part that we have achieved, is going to stay there if we don't do nothing. So we cannot, unfortunately, we cannot be that relaxed. Let's put it like that. We still have to pay attention and still fight for our rights as our grandmothers did.
And I think that is the perfect ending for our lecture. And because I think we are perfectly in time to finish it. So I would like again to thank Vera Lomazzi for accepting our invitation and for this great lecture. It was a wonderful start for our lecture series, which will continue on the 3rd of July. Shortly, we will diffuse the next flyer and the entire program that will go on until December. So thank you again, Vera. Thank you, everybody, for participating. And I hope to see you all in the next lectures. Have a good afternoon. Thank you very much.
Thank you all. Bye.
Goodbye.